On a rain-darkened qualification range, medics logged a cluster of identical injuries: crushed or bleeding thumbs sustained during manual loading of the new United States rifle, caliber .30 M1. Training safety sheets for 1941 through 1943 documented over 1,000 thumb injuries associated with bolt closure during loading. The semi-automatic action's operating spring could drive the bolt forward with well over 100 pounds of force. A thumb left on the follower at the wrong instant was struck and pinned. Yet the same mechanism gave American squads a decisive rate-of-fire advantage: 8-round en-bloc clip, semi-automatic cycling, battlefield reliability in mud, snow, and salt air. The Army did not redesign the rifle, it redesigned the training. By 1944, despite the injury reputation, the M1 armed virtually every United States rifleman from Normandy to Okinawa, because the data said speed of fire saved more lives than the thumb injuries cost. On an ordnance inspector's bench in Building 21, a prototype cycles .30-06 without a hand on the bolt. The gauge set notes where after endurance strings. The year is 1928. The United States Army, still relying on the bolt-action M1903 Springfield, faces a doctrinal question. Can a self-loading rifle replace the manual repeater without sacrificing reliability? John C. Garand, a Canadian-born machinist and design engineer employed by the United States Ordnance Department, began his work on gas-operated mechanisms in 1920. By 1928, his prototype chambered the standard .30-06 Springfield cartridge and cycled without manual intervention. The Ordnance Board, conservative by tradition, demanded proof. Between 1928 and 1936, Garand's design underwent exhaustive field trials. Test ranges recorded cumulative firings in the hundreds of thousands of rounds across multiple prototypes. Each iteration refined the gas system, the rotating bolt, and the 8-round en-bloc clip that would become the rifle's signature feature. Pre-war doctrine favored bolt-action simplicity. Officers argued that the M1903 had proven itself in the Great War. But field data told a different story. Trials demonstrated sustained semi-automatic accuracy at roughly twice the practical rate of fire of any bolt-action repeater. The shooter never broke his sight picture to manipulate a bolt. The rifle cycled, ejected, and chambered the next round automatically. In July 1936, the Ordnance Board formally accepted Garand's design as the United States rifle, caliber .30 M1. The board's minutes recorded the decision in clinical terms. Greatest advance in individual armament since smokeless powder. The language was restrained, but the implications were revolutionary. The M1 featured a gas-operated rotating bolt locked by lugs machined to tolerances measured in 0.010 of an inch. The 8-round clip inserted through the top of the receiver. When the last round fired, the clip ejected with a distinctive metallic ping. The operating rod, driven by expanding propellant gas tapped from the barrel, cycled the action with mechanical precision. The United States became the first major power to standardize a semi-automatic service rifle before the war that would test it. Germany, Britain, the Soviet Union, and Japan would enter the Second World War with bolt-action infantry arms. Only the United States would field a semi-automatic as standard issue. Procurement planning began immediately. Springfield Armory, the nation's primary small arms facility, retooled for mass production. Initial production numbers remained modest, hundreds per month in the late 1930s. But the infrastructure was in place. When war came, the factories would be ready. The rifle's adoption represented more than a technical advance. It embodied a shift in American military philosophy: firepower through technology, not mass. One rifleman with an M1 could deliver the volume of fire previously requiring multiple soldiers with bolt-action rifles. The mathematics of small unit tactics had changed. But the rifle carried a hidden cost, one that would not appear in Ordnance Board reports until soldiers began training with it in large numbers. The same gas system that provided semi-automatic function also created a loading hazard. The operating spring, necessary to drive the bolt forward with enough force to chamber a round under battlefield conditions, could crush a human thumb if the soldier released pressure at the wrong instant. The mechanism was unforgiving. Load the clip, press down on the operating rod handle, insert the clip fully, then withdraw the thumb as the bolt is released. Miss any step, and the bolt slammed forward with over 100 pounds of force. Training would have to address this. But first, the rifle had to reach the troops. A training officer demonstrates loading to a formation of recruits. He inserts the 8-round clip, presses down on the operating rod handle, and withdraws his thumb as the bolt snaps forward. The motion is smooth, practiced second nature. A recruit steps forward to try. He mimics the motion but releases pressure too early. The bolt slams forward. The recruit jerks his hand back, blood welling from beneath the thumbnail. The range officer logs the incident on an accident ledger. Bolt closure injury, right thumb, operator error. The recruit receives first aid and continues training. The injury is minor, but it will happen again, and again, and again. Between 1938 and 1941, Springfield Armory distributed approximately 55,000 M1 rifles to training posts across the United States. Camp Perry, Fort Benning, Camp Roberts, every major installation received early production models. And at every installation, medics began treating the same injury. The Army Medical Department classified the injuries as minor mechanical trauma. The cause was clear: improper hand position during loading. The bolt, driven by a robust operating spring necessary for reliable function, closed with enough force to crush skin, nail, and bone. The solution, according to official guidance, was not mechanical redesign but operator discipline. Engineering had met specifications. The rifle fed perfectly under test conditions. The gas system cycled reliably through thousands of rounds. Tolerances held. Accuracy remained within acceptable limits. The problem was human factors, not mechanical failure. Training manuals began to emphasize proper loading technique. Instructors demonstrated the correct hand position repeatedly. Posters appeared on range buildings. Keep thumb clear of bolt path. Range officers watched recruits closely during initial familiarization, but the injuries continued. The bolt's closing force could not be reduced without compromising reliability. A weaker spring might fail to chamber a round in muddy or freezing conditions. The M1 had to function in North Africa's sand, Europe's mud, and the Pacific's humidity. Battlefield reliability demanded a robust operating system. Training injuries were the price. National match competitors, among the first to receive production M1 rifles, quickly learned the loading discipline. Experienced shooters adapted within hours. But inexperienced recruits, handling a semi-automatic rifle for the first time, made mistakes. The bolt closure was fast, unforgiving, and painful. Incident reports accumulated in ordnance files. Dozens of injuries per month per major training center. The numbers were small compared to overall training volumes, but they were consistent. Every cohort of recruits produced a cluster of thumb injuries during the first week of M1 familiarization. Medical officers noted that the injuries, while painful, rarely resulted in permanent disability. Crushed thumbnails healed. Minor fractures mended. Soldiers learned. But the injury had earned a nickname among troops. Garand Thumb. The term appeared in informal correspondence, training cadre slang, and eventually official safety briefings. The Army faced a choice: redesign the rifle or improve the training. Redesign would delay production and might compromise the very reliability that justified the weapon's adoption. Improved training offered a faster, cheaper solution. The decision was made at the highest levels of the Ordnance Department. The M1 would not be modified. Training would adapt. By late 1941, the Army had tacitly accepted training injuries as the cost of modernizing infantry firepower. The bolt would continue to slam forward with 100 pounds of force. Recruits would continue to make mistakes, and medics would continue to treat crushed thumbs. But the rifle itself would remain unchanged, because the alternative, slower fire, lost battles, higher casualties, was unacceptable. A production chart on an Army ground forces desk spikes upward, from hundreds per month in 1939 to around 100,000 per month by mid-1942. The numbers represent more than manufacturing capacity. They represent a doctrinal revolution. Following the fall of France in June 1940, the United States accelerated rearmament under the National Defense Act. Springfield Armory, the nation's primary firearms facility, ran 3 shifts. Winchester Repeating Arms converted civilian production lines to military contracts. Subcontractors supplied components, barrels, stocks, operating rods, clips. The industrial base mobilized. Production volumes told the story. In 1939, Springfield produced approximately 600 M1 rifles per month. By mid-1941, monthly output exceeded 20,000. By mid-1942, combined production from Springfield and Winchester reached 100,000 rifles per month. The United States was arming an infantry force on a scale unprecedented in its history. General Leslie J. McNair, commanding Army Ground Forces, revised small arms doctrine to exploit the M1's capabilities. Traditional rifle squad tactics assumed bolt-action fire rates, 15 to 20 aimed rounds per minute per rifleman. The M1 doubled that. A squad armed with M1 rifles could deliver sustained fire volumes previously requiring twice as many soldiers. Training Circular 107, issued in 1942, codified the shift. Speed of fire will decide small unit combat. Every man must master rapid reload and maintain fire discipline under pressure. The doctrine assumed every rifleman would carry an M1 and exploit its semi-automatic action. Squad leaders were instructed to coordinate fire, using the M1's volume to suppress enemy positions while maneuver elements advanced. The rifle's characteristics drove drill design. Recruits practiced loading until the motion became automatic. Training cadre emphasized the 4-step sequence. Insert clip, press operating rod handle, seat clip fully, withdraw thumb as bolt releases. The motion had to be fast, smooth, and safe. Speed mattered in combat, but safety mattered in training. Range safety briefs now included explicit warnings about bolt closure. Instructors demonstrated incorrect technique, allowing the bolt to snap forward on an exposed thumb, then showed the correct method. The lesson was visceral, immediate, and effective. Recruits who saw a demonstration rarely made the same mistake. But demonstrations could not prevent all injuries. The learning curve was steep. First-time handling of the M1 produced a predictable spike in thumb injuries. Medical logs showed the pattern. Highest injury rates during week 1 of rifle familiarization, declining sharply by week 3, nearly absent by week 6. Proficiency required repetition. Repetition required time. And time in wartime mobilization was scarce. High-tolerance machining became a production bottleneck. Bolt-locking lugs and raceways required precision grinding. Chamber dimensions had to remain within strict tolerances to ensure reliable extraction. Gas port sizes affected cycling speed and reliability. Every component underwent systematic gauging before assembly. Quality control slowed output but ensured battlefield performance. Standardized N-block clips simplified logistics. Each clip held 8 rounds of .30-06 ammunition. Clips were disposable, ejecting automatically after the last round fired. This simplified the supply chain. No need to recover and redistribute clips as with stripper clip systems, but increased manufacturing volumes. By 1942, clip production exceeded rifle production by a factor of 50. Unit tables of organization updated to reflect the new weapon. Infantry regiments now assumed every rifleman carried an M1. Ammunition allocations increased. Training schedules extended to ensure proficiency. The rifle was no longer an experimental arm. It was a standard issue. The United States entered the Second World War with a rifle that could injure a recruit but overmatch an enemy squad. The trade-off was explicit, documented, and accepted. Training would manage the risk. Doctrine would exploit the advantage. And production would ensure that every American rifleman, from Normandy to Okinawa, carried the most advanced individual weapon on any battlefield. The thumb injuries continued, but so did the war. And in war, the rifle that fired fastest often decided who survived. A signal corps projector throws a training film frame onto a screen in a darkened barracks. The title reads, Loading and Operation of the United States Rifle Caliber 30 M1. An instructor's hand appears on screen, demonstrating the 4-step loading sequence in slow motion. His thumb remains clear of the bolt path. The narrator's voice is calm, precise, institutional. Maintain pressure on the operating rod handle while loading to prevent injury. Medical Corps statistics recorded over 1,000 thumb lacerations and fractures across training centers in 1942 alone. The injuries clustered predictably. First week of rifle familiarization, highest incidence. Second week, declining. Third week, rare. The learning curve was steep but consistent. Once a soldier learned the discipline, injuries became almost impossible. The bolt's recoil spring exerted 100 to 110 pounds of closing pressure. Engineering specifications required this force to ensure positive chambering under adverse conditions. Mud, sand, ice, salt water. The same force that guaranteed battlefield reliability produced training injuries. The mechanism was not defective. It was unforgiving. Fort Benning, home of the United States Army Infantry School, became the center of training standardization. Range officers compiled incident reports. Medical staff tracked injury patterns. Training developers analyzed the data and produced corrective materials. The result was a comprehensive program of films, posters, and hands-on instruction designed to reduce injuries without modifying the rifle. Training film TF 23-3312, produced by Army Pictorial Service in 1942, became mandatory viewing for all recruits before live-fire qualification. The film ran 12 minutes. It showed correct technique from multiple angles. It demonstrated common errors and their consequences. And it emphasized the four-step sequence until the motion became automatic. Posters appeared on every rifle range in the training command. One design showed a side-view diagram of the M1's action with the bolt highlighted in red. The caption read, "Bolt closes with over 100 pounds force. Keep your thumb clear." Another poster displayed a close-up photograph of a crushed thumbnail with the warning, "Improper loading causes injury. Follow training procedures." Non-commissioned officers received additional instruction on supervising rifle handling. Range cadre watched recruits during initial familiarization, correcting hand position before injuries occurred. The emphasis shifted from reactive first aid to proactive prevention. Catch the error before it produces an injury. Correct the technique before it becomes a habit. But the rifle's characteristics could not be softened. Semi-automatic functions demanded a robust operating system. The gas port, drilled into the barrel near the muzzle, diverted propellant gas to drive the operating rod rearward. The recoil spring then drove the rod forward, cycling the bolt and chambering the next round. The cycle time was measured in fractions of a second. The forces involved were substantial, and the rifle did not distinguish between a cartridge and a thumb. Contrast. While the rifle punished inexperience, once mastered it offered an unmatched rate of fire. Comparative trials documented the advantage. A Kar 98K rifleman using a bolt-action repeater could deliver 15 to 20 aimed rounds per minute under field conditions. An M1 rifleman using semi-automatic fire could deliver 40 to 50 aimed rounds per minute with less fatigue. The difference was not marginal. It was decisive. The training cadre began describing the injury as a lesson, not a defect. The phrasing appeared in informal instruction, range briefings, and cadre guidance. The injury taught discipline. It reinforced the importance of proper technique. And it created a shared experience among soldiers who learned to respect the rifle's mechanism. By late 1943, injury rates had declined significantly across the training base. Not because the rifle had changed, but because training had improved. Recruits arrived expecting the hazard. Instructors emphasized prevention. And the four-step loading sequence became as automatic as breathing. Medical logs still recorded injuries, dozens per month across major training centers. But the rate per thousand trainees had dropped. The initial spike during week 1 remained, but its magnitude had decreased. Training was working. The rifle remained unchanged. And soldiers continued to learn that mastery of the M1 began with respect for its mechanism. The trade-off remained explicit. Training managed risk in exchange for battlefield advantage. The Army had made its choice. And as American forces deployed to combat theaters in North Africa, Europe, and the Pacific, the M1 would prove that the choice had been correct. A metallurgist measures a bolt lug with a tense micrometer. The reading, within 7/10,000ths of an inch of specification. An inspection stamp is applied. The bolt proceeds to assembly. This level of precision defines the M1's reliability. The rifle's mechanism is both simple and sophisticated. A gas port, drilled into the barrel approximately 7 inches from the muzzle, taps propellant gas during firing. The gas drives an operating rod rearward. The rod, connected to the bolt, unlocks the bolt's rotating lugs from the receiver and extracts the spent case. A recoil spring, housed below the barrel, compresses during rearward travel and then drives the operating rod forward, chambering the next round and locking the bolt. Engineering that risks a digit in training saves minutes in battle, the most precious commodity. The operating spring provides 100 to 110 pounds of closing force. This force ensures positive chambering in dirt, ice, and fouling. Battlefield conditions demand reliability. The mechanism delivers. But the same spring force that ensures chambering can injure a thumb left on the follower at the wrong instant. Bolt locking lug clearances are measured in 10,000ths of an inch. The tolerances are tight because the pressures are high. The 30-06 cartridge generates approximately 50,000 pounds per square inch of chamber pressure. The bolt must lock securely to contain this pressure. Any looseness would cause extraction failures or, worse, catastrophic bolt failure. Barrel life averages 10,000 rounds under normal service conditions. Rifling wear is gradual and predictable. Accuracy degrades slowly. Most M1 rifles in service never approach their barrel life limit. Combat conditions rarely allow sustained firing to the point of barrel erosion. But the design margin exists. The 8-round N-block clip is the rifle's signature feature and its most controversial element. The clip inserts through the top of the receiver. When the last round fires, the clip ejects with a distinctive metallic ping. Some soldiers worry that the sound alerts enemy troops. Field testing will later show this concern is largely unfounded. Battlefield noise masks the clip ejection, but the myth persists. The clip also creates the loading hazard. The follower, which rides on top of the clip and pushes cartridges upward, sits directly in the bolt's path. During loading, the soldier presses down on the operating rod handle to hold the bolt open. He inserts the clip. He seats the clip fully. Then he releases pressure on the operating rod handle, allowing the bolt to move forward under spring pressure. If his thumb remains on the follower, the bolt strikes it with full force. Comparative rates of fire tell the story. A Kar 98K, the standard German service rifle, fires 15 to 20 aimed rounds per minute. An Arisaka Type 99, the standard Japanese service rifle, fires 18 to 22 aimed rounds per minute. Both are bolt-action repeaters requiring manual cycling after each shot. An M1 Garand fires 40 to 50 aimed rounds per minute once the operator achieves proficiency. The M1's advantage is not subtle. It is overwhelming. Technical manuals specify loading posture and warn of bolt closure hazard during manual seating. The language is clinical but clear. Failure to maintain pressure on the operating rod handle during loading may result in personal injury. The manuals do not describe the injury in detail. They assume soldiers will learn through training. And they do. The gas system is self-regulating within limits. Gas pressure varies with ammunition type, barrel fouling, and temperature. But the system compensates automatically. A clean rifle cycles smoothly. A fouled rifle cycles more slowly but still reliably. Only extreme fouling or mechanical damage stops the action. Maintenance is simple. Field strip the rifle into 6 major components: barrel and receiver group, trigger housing group, stock, operating rod, bolt, and follower rod. Clean the gas cylinder. Lubricate moving parts. Reassemble. The process takes less than 10 minutes. Soldiers can perform it in darkness, in mud, under fire. The same engineering that creates the loading hazard also creates battlefield dominance. The robust operating spring ensures function under stress. The tight tolerances ensure accuracy. The gas system ensures sustained fire without manual intervention. The rifle works because the forces are strong, the parts are precise, and the design is unforgiving. A rifleman who masters the M1 commands firepower unmatched by any bolt-action opponent. The price of mastery is discipline. The reward is survival. And in combat, survival depends on seconds. The M1 gives its user those seconds. After-action reports pile on a battalion S3 desk. Belt counts and ammunition expenditures are tallied. The numbers tell a story that doctrine predicted but battlefield conditions now confirm. The M1 Garand delivers decisive fire superiority. 2nd Corps, under Major General George S. Patton, Jr., engaged German and Italian forces near El Getter in late March 1943. The 1st Infantry Division, armed with M1 rifles, held defensive positions against armored and infantry counterattacks. Unit reports documented tens of thousands of rounds expended per regiment. Stoppage rates remained low despite desert sand exposure. The contrast was immediate. German infantry, equipped with Kar-98K bolt-action rifles, advanced in traditional formations. American rifle squads, exploiting semi-automatic fire, delivered sustained volumes that shattered the attacks before they closed. Axis forces expected parity with Allied small arms fire. Reality delivered something else entirely. After-action report from the 26th Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division, El Getter operation. Rate of fire breaks counterattacks before forming. Enemy infantry unable to close under M1 volumes. Recommend continued emphasis on rapid reload and fire discipline. Field conditions tested the rifle's reliability claims. North African sand infiltrated every mechanism. Daytime temperatures exceeded 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Nighttime temperatures dropped to near freezing. Humidity was negligible. Dust was constant. The M1 continued to function. Maintenance logs from line companies showed minimal stoppages attributable to mechanical failure. Most issues involved ammunition. Dented cases, corroded primers, damaged clips. The rifle itself proved robust. Soldiers cleaned their weapons daily, sometimes twice daily in heavy sand. The gas system required particular attention, but the rifle worked. Italian forces, equipped with Carcano M91 rifles, faced similar difficulties. The Carcano was a competent bolt-action design, but it could not match the M1's rate of fire. German troops, veterans of Eastern Front combat, recognized the difference immediately. Intelligence reports captured from German units noted American semi-automatic rifles and advised caution during close-range engagements. The rifle's 8-round capacity became tactically significant. A rifleman could engage multiple targets without reloading. Suppressive fire could be sustained longer. Fire and maneuver drills executed more smoothly because fewer soldiers needed to pause for manual reloading. The cumulative effect was a squad that fought differently, more aggressively, more flexibly, than opponents equipped with bolt-action arms. By mid-1943, American forces had moved from Tunisia into Sicily and then mainland Italy. The M1 accompanied them. Italian terrain added new challenges. Mud, rain, steep slopes, close-quarters village fighting. The rifle adapted. Gas systems handled moisture. Stocks withstood impacts. Bolts cycled reliably despite fouling. Combat reports consistently praised the M1's performance. Company commanders requested additional ammunition allocations to exploit the rifle's fire rate. Battalion supply officers noted higher expenditure rates than doctrine predicted but considered the trade-off acceptable. Fire superiority saved lives. Ammunition could be resupplied. Lives could not. Axis prisoners, interrogated after capture, described the psychological effect of American fire volumes. The semi-automatic cadence was distinctive, faster than bolt-action fire, sustained without pauses for manual cycling. German and Italian troops learned to recognize the sound. It meant American infantry was close, and close engagements against M1-equipped squads rarely ended well for Axis forces. Field praise for the M1 correlated with declining complaints about training injuries. Soldiers who had cursed the rifle during boot camp now defended it in combat. The thumb injury, once a source of resentment, became a shared memory. The rifle that bit during training saved lives in battle. The trade-off was no longer abstract. It was survival. By late 1944, the Mediterranean theater had validated every claim made for the M1 during peacetime trials. Rate of fire, confirmed. Reliability under adverse conditions, confirmed. Tactical advantage over bolt-action opponents, confirmed. The rifle worked as designed. And American infantry, armed with the best individual weapon on any battlefield, pressed forward. A G2 summary reviews interrogation notes collected from German prisoners captured during hedgerow fighting. No confirmed incidents where a clip ping drew enemy assault advantage. The myth, repeated in training camps and barracks discussions, finds no support in battlefield evidence. The European theater of operations now provides the largest test of the M1 under sustained combat conditions. Hundreds of thousands of American soldiers carry the rifle through the bocage of Normandy, the forests of the Ardennes, and eventually across the Rhine into Germany itself. The rifle's performance under these conditions will settle debates that began in peacetime trials. The clip ejection ping remains a point of discussion. When the last round fires, the en-bloc clip ejects automatically with a distinctive metallic sound. Some soldiers worry that German troops, hearing the ping, will recognize that an American rifleman's weapon is empty and choose that moment to attack. The concern sounds plausible in theory. Field evidence suggests otherwise. Battlefield acoustics are chaotic. Artillery fire, small arms fire, explosions, vehicle engines, shouted commands. The noise is constant and overwhelming. A single metallic ping, lasting a fraction of a second, is inaudible beyond a few meters under combat conditions. Even if heard, identifying its source and timing an assault accordingly would require split-second coordination rarely achievable under fire. Interrogation reports from captured German soldiers include no references to exploiting clip ejection sounds. When asked about American small arms tactics, German prisoners mention the semi-automatic fire rate, the volume of fire, and the aggressive use of fire and maneuver. They do not mention clip sounds. The absence of evidence is itself evidence. Maintenance ledgers from European theater of operations units show average rifle service life approaching 22,000 rounds. Failure rates remain below 1% in line units with proper maintenance. The rifles, subjected to continuous use over months of sustained combat, perform as designed. Broken parts are rare. Worn parts are replaced during routine maintenance. Catastrophic failures are almost unknown. A statistical survey conducted among 2,300 infantrymen in the European theater of operations in late 1944 asked soldiers to rate their weapons. 97% rated the M1 excellent for reliability and combat handling. The remaining 3% rated it satisfactory. Not a single soldier rated it unsatisfactory. The survey included questions about specific concerns. Did the clip ejection sound compromise tactical security? Less than 5% of respondents believed it did. Did the loading mechanism present difficulties under combat conditions? Less than 2% reported issues. Had the rifle failed at a critical moment? Less than 1% reported failures. The data painted a clear picture. Soldiers trusted the rifle. They relied on it. They praised it. And they wanted nothing to do with alternative designs. Several experimental rifles were tested in the European theater of operations during this period. None matched the M1's combination of reliability, rate of fire, and soldier confidence. Training emphasis on correct loading discipline continued to pay dividends. Soldiers who learned the four-step sequence in boot camp executed it automatically under fire. Loading an M1 became as reflexive as breathing. The thumb injury, once common in training, became rare in combat units. Experienced soldiers did not make the mistake. German small arms design, by contrast, had not advanced to semi-automatic infantry rifles. The standard Kar-98K remained a bolt-action repeater. German paratroop units received FG-42 semi-automatic rifles in limited numbers, and late-war STG-44 assault rifles appeared in select units. But the bulk of German infantry fought with bolt-action rifles designed before the First World War. The technological gap was decisive. Confidence in the M1 system reduced pressure to modify the design or seek alternatives. Training emphasis remained on correct loading discipline and proper maintenance. The rifle's data-backed advantage silenced critics who had questioned the wisdom of accepting training injuries for battlefield performance. A myth fades. The rifle's reality remains. The clip ping does not compromise security. The loading hazard does not reduce effectiveness. The rifle, designed in the 1930s and fielded in the 1940s, dominates battlefields from the Atlantic to the Rhine. And American soldiers, armed with the fastest-firing, most reliable infantry rifle in the world, continue their advance. A Navy test sheet chronicles a post-immersion function check after seawater exposure. An M1 rifle, submerged in salt water for 12 hours, is removed, drained, and fired. The rifle cycles, passes inspection. The test validates design choices made years earlier. The Pacific Theater presents environmental challenges unlike anything encountered in Europe or North Africa. Humidity approaches 100%. Rain falls daily during monsoon season. Salt air corrodes metal. Jungle vegetation harbors moisture against every surface. Equipment fails. Men sicken. But the M1 Garand continues to function. The rifle's resistance to environmental degradation traces to deliberate engineering decisions. The gas cylinder, a critical component exposed to propellant gases and external elements, is made from corrosion-resistant steel. The barrel is chrome-plated in the bore to resist pitting. External metal surfaces receive protective finishes. These choices, made during peacetime development, now prove their worth under tropical conditions. Ordnance maintenance officers in the Pacific compile data on rifle performance under extreme humidity and salt exposure. Post-immersion firing trials, conducted at Navy testing facilities, subject rifles to conditions far exceeding normal field exposure. Rifles are submerged in seawater, coated with salt spray, exposed to constant humidity, then fired. Most pass. Some require cleaning and lubrication. Few fail entirely. Japanese small arms, by contrast, suffer under the same conditions. The Arisaka Type 99 rifle, a bolt-action design, functions reliably when new and properly maintained. But corrosion degrades performance quickly. Salt water exposure causes bolts to seize. Humidity promotes rust. Field maintenance under jungle conditions is difficult. Japanese rifles, designed for temperate climates, struggle in the tropics. American soldiers learn to maintain their M1 rifles obsessively. Daily cleaning becomes routine. Soldiers disassemble their rifles during rest periods, clean every component, apply fresh lubricant, and reassemble. The ritual takes 15 minutes. It prevents corrosion, ensures function, and saves lives. Soldiers who neglect maintenance pay the price in stoppages and malfunctions. The rifle's 8-round capacity proves advantageous in jungle combat. Engagements occur at close range, often without warning. A soldier who can fire 8 rounds without reloading has a decisive advantage over an opponent who must manually cycle a bolt after each shot. Fire superiority in the jungle is measured in seconds. The M1 provides those seconds. Pacific training centers continue to log thumb injuries through 1945. The loading hazard has not disappeared. New replacements, arriving from the United States with minimal familiarization training, make the same mistakes soldiers made in 1941. The learning curve remains steep, but experienced soldiers who have survived months of combat no longer injure themselves. Proficiency comes through repetition, and combat provides repetition. Routine field lubrication schedules adapt to tropical conditions. Standard lubricants, adequate in temperate climates, become too viscous in heat or too thin in humidity. Ordnance officers experiment with lubricant formulations. They test commercial oils. They modify application procedures. The goal is consistent function across temperature ranges from freezing mountain peaks to 100-degree jungle valleys. The rifle's design accommodates variations in lubrication as long as moving parts remain protected. Combat reports from Marine Corps and Army units in the Pacific praise the M1's reliability. Battalion after-action reports note sustained fire capability during Japanese counterattacks. Company commanders credit the rifle's rate of fire with breaking banzai charges before they reached American lines. The semi-automatic action, controversial during peacetime development, proves itself under the most challenging conditions imaginable. By VJ Day, cumulative production exceeds 5.4 million M1 rifles. The design and its cautionary loading routine has gone global. American forces carry the rifle across the Pacific from Guadalcanal to Okinawa. The weapon that injured thumbs in Georgia now saves lives in the Philippines, Iwo Jima, and Saipan. The environmental stress of tropical warfare validates the rifle's mechanical robustness. The training hazard persists but remains manageable. Soldiers adapt. The rifle does not. And in the calculus of war, a weapon that functions reliably under extreme conditions justifies the training discipline it demands. Japanese prisoners, interrogated after capture, described the psychological impact of American semi-automatic fire. The faster cadence, the sustained volumes, the ability to deliver multiple aimed shots without pause, all contribute to a perception of American fire superiority. That perception, rooted in the reality of the M1's performance, affects enemy morale and tactics. The Pacific Campaign confirms what North Africa, Italy, and Normandy already demonstrated. The M1 Garand is the most effective infantry rifle fielded by any combatant in the Second World War. It fires faster, cycles more reliably, and requires less manual intervention than any contemporary design. The price, training injuries, careful maintenance, disciplined handling, is acceptable because the alternative is slower fire, lost engagements, and higher casualties. By 1945, the rifle has earned its reputation through performance, not marketing. Soldiers trust it because it works. Commanders praise it because it wins engagements. And the Army, which accepted thumb injuries as the cost of modernization in 1941, now sees vindication in every after-action report from every theater of the war. A bound ordnance evaluation volume sits on a conference table. The title reads, Performance Analysis. United States Rifle Caliber 30 M1, Combat Operations 1942 to 1945, Inside. Stoppage codes, parts wear data, training incident summaries, field reports from every theater. The document represents the most comprehensive evaluation of an infantry weapon in military history. The war has ended. American forces occupy Germany and Japan. Demobilization has begun. And the Ordnance Department faces a decision. Does the M1 Garand require modification based on wartime experience? The data tell a consistent story. Reported malfunction rates average approximately 1 per several thousand rounds under field conditions. Training injuries, while documented and cataloged, cluster during initial familiarization and decline sharply with proficiency. Combat injury attribution, nil. Not a single documented case of a soldier injured by the loading mechanism during combat operations. The Ordnance Board convenes to review the findings. Officers who supervised production, engineers who designed components, and field representatives who observed combat performance all contribute testimony. The question is explicit. Should the bolt-closing mechanism be modified to reduce training injuries? Engineering analysis suggests modifications are possible. A mechanical safety could prevent bolt closure until deliberately released. A lighter operating spring could reduce closing force. A revised follower design could eliminate the thumb hazard entirely. Each option is evaluated. Each option is rejected. The reasoning is documented in Ordnance Board Report number 2307. No modification necessary. Operator familiarity sufficient. The report elaborates. Mechanical changes might compromise the reliability that made the rifle effective. A safety mechanism adds complexity and potential failure points. A lighter spring might fail to chamber rounds under fouled conditions. A revised follower might affect feeding reliability. The board's decision is unanimous. Retain the mechanism unchanged and invest in standardized instruction and range supervision. The rifle worked as designed throughout the war. Soldiers who mastered it survived. Training can prevent injuries. Mechanical redesign offers uncertain benefits and definite risks. Contrast. Expectation at war's end was that painful training experiences would drive post-war redesign. Reality, battlefield performance vindicated the original design. The hazard attributed to procedural error, preventable through training, not mechanical flaw requiring correction. The institutional decision carries weight beyond the M1 itself. It establishes a principle: training managed risk is acceptable when the alternative compromises combat effectiveness. The United States military will train soldiers to handle unforgiving mechanisms rather than soften those mechanisms at the cost of battlefield capability. Statistics compiled across all theaters confirm the decision's logic. Over 6 billion rounds of .30-06 ammunition were fired through M1 rifles during the war. Mechanical failures were rare. Training injuries numbered in the low thousands across millions of soldiers trained. Combat deaths prevented by fire superiority, incalculable but substantial based on comparative engagement outcomes against Axis forces. The thumb injury, once a source of controversy and concern, becomes a footnote in the rifle's history. Medical Corps officers note it in training safety reviews. Range instructors continue to emphasize proper loading technique. But the injury itself is no longer seen as evidence of design flaw. It is evidence of the rifle's unforgiving precision, the same precision that ensured battlefield reliability. A painful training myth becomes peacetime folklore, but the data closes the case. The M1 Garand will not be modified to prevent thumb injuries. The rifle that bit recruits also broke enemy attacks. The mechanism that demanded discipline also delivered dominance. And the Army, examining 4 years of global combat data, concludes that the trade-off was worth it. The report's final paragraph is bureaucratic in tone but decisive in content. The M1 rifle performed its intended function under all combat conditions encountered during the war. Training procedures adequately address safe handling. No design changes recommended. A cold weather test sheet records ambient temperature, -30 degrees Celsius. An M1 Garand, stored overnight in unheated conditions, is loaded and fired. The operating rod cycles, the bolt locks, the rifle functions. A Soviet Mosin Nagant, tested under identical conditions with standard lubricants, locks up. The bolt will not move. June 1950. North Korean forces cross the 38th parallel. The United States responds. And the M1 Garand, mothballed in arsenals since 1945, returns to war. Reactivated depots issue approximately 1.2 million M1 rifles from reserve stocks. The rifles, stored in protective cosmoline, require cleaning and inspection before issue. Armorers check headspace, test gas systems, and replace worn springs. Most rifles return to service without modification. The design that proved itself in the tropics will now face Arctic cold. Winter 1950 to 1951 proves the harshest in decades. Temperatures at the chosen reservoir drop to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Weapons freeze. Vehicles fail to start. Men suffer from frostbite, but the M1, properly maintained with cold weather lubricants, continues to function. The key is lubrication. Standard oils congeal in extreme cold. Ordnance officers issue cold weather lubricants, light oils that remain fluid at sub-zero temperatures. Soldiers learn to apply lubricant sparingly. Excess oil attracts dirt and freezes, and to cycle their weapons regularly to prevent ice buildup. The techniques work. The rifles function. Contrast. Expectation that semi-automatic rifles would fail in a deep cold. Reality. Proper lubricants and clearances keep the M1 operational while bolt-action rifles freeze. Chinese forces, equipped with bolt-action rifles and submachine guns, face no mechanical advantage. American semi-automatic fire dominates engagements even in Arctic conditions. Training commands, reactivated to process Korean War mobilization, rediscover the thumb injury. New recruits, many born after World War II, arrive with no familiarity with the M1. Boot camps repeat the training cycle of 1941 through 1943. Films are shown. Posters are displayed. Instructors demonstrate proper technique. And medics treat crushed thumbs. Army Circular 5914, issued in 1951, reiterates guidance unchanged since 1942. Hand pressure must restrain the bolt until clip fully seated. The language is identical. The mechanism is unchanged. The hazard remains. And the training response remains. Emphasize discipline, not redesign. Refresher courses for recalled reservists and National Guard units note thumb injuries during initial refamiliarization. Veterans who carried the M1 in World War II perform the loading sequence automatically. But soldiers whose service ended in 1946 require practice to regain proficiency. The learning curve is shorter for experienced soldiers, but the hazard remains until proficiency returns. Combat reports from Korea confirm the rifle's continued effectiveness. Rate of fire, reliability under adverse conditions, and soldier confidence all match World War II standards. Engagement outcomes against Chinese and North Korean forces, both equipped with bolt-action rifles, favor American units. The M1's advantage, proven in Europe and the Pacific, proves itself again in Korea. Cold weather operations add unique challenges. Operating rods, if over-lubricated, accumulate ice. Gas ports, if not cleaned regularly, can become obstructed by frozen moisture. Soldiers learn to disassemble and inspect their rifles daily, removing ice and applying fresh lubricant. The maintenance is time-consuming, but necessary. Rifles that receive proper cold weather care function reliably. Rifles that do not fail. New war, old rule. Mastery first, mechanics unchanged. The rifle that fought across Europe and the Pacific now fights in Korea. The mechanism remains identical. The training remains identical. And the results remain identical. American infantry, armed with semi-automatic rifles, outshoot opponents equipped with bolt-action arms. By 1953, the M1 has proven itself in tropical jungles, European mud, North African sand, and Arctic cold. The rifle works everywhere. It demands discipline everywhere. And soldiers, across 2 wars and multiple theaters, learn the same lesson. Respect the mechanism, master the technique, and the rifle will perform. The thumb injury, recurring with each new generation of recruits, becomes institutional memory. Every soldier who carries an M1 learns the loading sequence. Every unit has veterans who remember someone who made the mistake. The injury becomes part of the rifle's identity, a reminder that battlefield effectiveness sometimes requires unforgiving precision. A test rack holds T-44 rifle candidates beside M1 Garands. Gauges check bolt geometry that echoes the Garand lineage. The new rifle will fire a different cartridge, 7.62 by 51mm NATO instead of 30-06 Springfield, but the operating principle remains unchanged. Gas-operated, rotating bolt, semi-automatic fire. The United States Army seeks a new infantry rifle. The M1 Garand, while effective, has limitations. It lacks selective fire capability, cannot accept a detachable box magazine. It chambers a cartridge considered too powerful for modern infantry combat. The search begins for a replacement. Multiple prototypes compete. The T-44, designed by Springfield Armory, evolves directly from the M1. It retains the gas system, the rotating bolt, and much of the M1's architecture. But it chambers the new NATO standard cartridge and accepts a 20-round detachable magazine. Other designs, more radical in concept, compete for adoption. The T-44 wins. In 1957, the T-44 is standardized as the United States rifle, 7.62mm, M14. The designation changes. The cartridge changes. But the core Garand architecture, including the potential for the same loading pinch if mishandled during magazine insertion, persists. Expectation. New rifle solves old problem. Reality. The M14 retains core Garand design DNA, including loading characteristics that require careful handling. The bolt still closes with substantial force. The mechanism still demands respect. Training emphasis on proper loading technique continues unchanged. But the M1 does not disappear with the M14's adoption. By 1959, over 6 million M1 rifles exist in global inventories. The rifles arm not only American forces but also dozens of allied nations. The Mutual Defense Assistance Program distributes surplus M1 rifles to NATO partners, Asian allies, and Latin American countries. Italy receives tens of thousands of M1 rifles and establishes domestic production under license. The Italian-produced rifles, designated M1 Garand Beretta, are mechanically identical to American-made examples. Italian training manuals translate American guidance, including cautionary lines about bolt closure risk. Denmark, Greece, Turkey, Japan, South Korea, and numerous other nations receive M1 rifles through military aid programs. Each receiving nation translates technical manuals. Each nation trains its soldiers on the weapon, and each nation's manuals mirror the United States Army warning. Beware bolt closure on thumb. The injury note becomes an international footnote to American small arms engineering. Foreign armorers training on M1 maintenance learn the same loading discipline American soldiers learned in 1941. Foreign recruits make the same mistakes. Foreign medics treat the same injuries. The rifle's characteristics travel with the rifle itself. Aberdeen Proving Ground evaluators, testing the T-44 and its competitors, note that Garand-derived designs carry forward both the advantages and the demands of the original. Reliability under adverse conditions. Excellent. Rate of fire. Superior to bolt-action arms. Loading discipline required. Yes. The trade-offs remain consistent across designs. By 1959, the M1 Garand has become a global weapon. American production exceeded 6.25 million rifles. Italian production adds thousands more. The rifle serves in climates from Arctic Norway to tropical Vietnam. It arms professional soldiers, conscripts, reservists, and ceremonial units. And everywhere it serves, soldiers learn the four-step loading sequence that prevents injury. The rifle's design DNA propagates through successor weapons. The M14 carries Garand operating principles into the 1960s. The M1A, a civilian semi-automatic version of the M14, extends the lineage further. Even modern designs echo Garand's gas-operated, rotating bolt architecture. The rifle's influence extends far beyond its service life. Training doctrine, not mechanical change, remains the mitigation for the loading hazard. No nation that adopts the M1 modifies the bolt closing mechanism. No training command develops alternative loading procedures. The rifle is issued as designed. Soldiers are trained to handle it properly. Injuries occur during training. Proficiency eliminates them. The pattern repeats across nations and decades. The Garand's legacy is institutional as well as mechanical. The rifle established that training-managed risk is acceptable when battlefield performance justifies it. Subsequent weapons, incorporating lessons from the M1's development and service, apply the same principle. Demand discipline from operators rather than compromise capability through mechanical safeguards. Foreign military observers studying American small arms development note the consistency. The United States fields weapons that demand proficiency but deliver performance. The M1 exemplifies this philosophy. It requires careful handling. It rewards mastery. It does not forgive carelessness. And nations that adopt it accept the trade-off because combat effectiveness justifies training discipline. By the end of the 1950s, the M1 Garand transitioned from frontline service to reserve and ceremonial roles in the United States military. But globally, the rifle remains in service. And its lesson, that precision engineering demands precise handling, remains part of military training wherever the rifle serves. An armorer records a re-Parkerized receiver's serial number, 3.5 million range, manufactured 1943, refurbished 1985. The rifle will be issued through the Civilian Marksmanship Program. A safety brief accompanies the sale. Proper loading technique, bolt closure hazard, the same four-step sequence taught in 1942. The M1 Garand does not retire. It transitions. Frontline service ends, but ceremonial service continues. Reserve stocks are maintained. Surplus rifles enter civilian circulation through legal channels. And the rifle's mechanism, unchanged since 1936, continues to function and continues to demand respect. The United States Marine Corps Silent Drill Platoon performs precision rifle handling with M1 Garands. The routines include spinning the rifle, tossing it between Marines, and executing complex manual of arms sequences. Every movement is choreographed. Every rifle functions exactly as designed. And every Marine in the unit has mastered the loading sequence that prevents injury. Military funerals at Arlington National Cemetery employ honor guards armed with M1 rifles. The three-volley salute, fired with blank cartridges, requires careful handling and precise timing. Guards train extensively on safe weapons handling. The bolt still closes with 100 pounds of force. The mechanism still does not forgive errors. But trained honor guards handle the rifles without incident year after year, funeral after funeral. The Civilian Marksmanship Program, established by Congress to promote marksmanship training, became the primary distributor of surplus M1 rifles to American civilians. Between 1996 and the present, the program sells hundreds of thousands of M1 rifles. Each sale includes safety documentation. Each buyer receives instruction on proper handling. And the loading caution, written in 1942, remains relevant in the 21st century. Civilian competitive shooters discover the M1's accuracy and reliability. High-power rifle competitions include M1 Garand categories. Shooters compete at distances from 200 to 600 yards. The rifle, designed for combat, proves equally capable on target ranges. Iron sights, gas-operated action, and 30-06 power combine to deliver match-grade accuracy in skilled hands. Collectors document serial numbers exceeding 6.25 million across American and foreign production. The rifles represent industrial history, wartime production, post-war rebuilds, foreign licensing, decades of service. Each serial number tells a story. Some rifles saw combat in multiple wars. Some remained in depots, unfired. Some were exported, imported, rebuilt, and refurbished multiple times. All share the same basic mechanism designed in the 1930s. Modern safety sheets preserve the same loading steps established in World War II. Civilian shooting organizations, military training commands, and ceremonial units all emphasize the four-step sequence. The wording varies slightly across organizations, but the substance remains identical. Maintain pressure on the operating rod handle. Insert clip fully. Withdraw thumb before releasing bolt pressure. Institutional memory keeps the hazard rare among trained users. New shooters, receiving instruction from experienced users, learn proper technique before handling live ammunition. Competitive shooters, drilling loading sequences thousands of times, execute the motions automatically. Honor guards, practicing ceremonial routines repeatedly, internalize safe handling. Skill transmits across generations. Yet the injury still occurs. Civilian ranges occasionally report crushed thumbs from inexperienced M1 shooters. YouTube videos document the injury, usually accompanied by rueful commentary from the victim. Internet forums discuss proper loading technique and share warnings. The rifle's bite remains legendary even among shooters born decades after the rifle left military service. Contrast: expectation that the rifle would become a museum piece. Reality: sustained ceremonial service, active civilian use, and living marksmanship tradition with original mechanics. The rifle did not fade into history. It adapted to new roles while remaining mechanically unchanged. Decades after the last M1 left frontline military service, the first thing taught about America's most famous rifle is still how not to get bitten. The lesson has remained constant across 8 decades, multiple wars, dozens of nations, and millions of soldiers. Respect the mechanism, master the technique, and the rifle will perform. The M1 Garand lives on, not as a relic, but as a functional tool. Ceremonial units carry it with pride. Competitive shooters fire it with precision. Collectors preserve it with care. And every person who handles one learns the same discipline soldiers learned at Fort Benning in 1941. An honor guard presents arms. 7 Marines, white gloves, precise rifles at identical angles. The M1 Garands gleam in morning light. An order is called. Bolts snap forward under control, a practice gesture from an 80-year-old manual. 3 volleys fire. Empty clips eject with 7 metallic pings in near-perfect unison. The rifles, designed before the Second World War, perform flawlessly in the 21st century. This is the M1 Garand's final truth. Folklore fixates on pain, but records show the rifle's real story. Between 1941 and 1953, medical logs confirm over 1,000 training injuries attributed to bolt closure during loading. The injuries were real, documented, and predictable. They occurred during initial familiarization when recruits, handling a semi-automatic rifle for the first time, made timing errors during the loading sequence. The injuries were painful but rarely resulted in permanent disability. Crushed thumbnails healed, minor fractures mended, and soldiers learned. But combat attribution 0. Not a single documented case of a soldier injured by the M1's loading mechanism during combat operations across 2 wars, multiple theaters, and millions of soldiers. The rifle that bit recruits during training never injured a soldier during battle. The distinction is crucial. The rifle's tactical contribution is measurable. Rate of fire, 40 to 50 aimed rounds per minute versus 15 to 20 for bolt-action opponents. Reliability, malfunction rates below 1% under field conditions with proper maintenance. Soldier confidence. Surveys showed 97% of combat troops rated the rifle excellent. These numbers represent more than statistics. They represent lives saved through fire superiority. General George S. Patton, commanding 3rd Army in Europe, wrote in 1945, "In my opinion, the M1 rifle is the greatest battle implement ever devised." Patton was not given to exaggeration in official correspondence. His assessment reflected battlefield reality. The rifle worked. It gave American infantry a decisive advantage. And that advantage, accumulated across thousands of engagements, helped win the war. The Army's institutional judgment, rendered in 1946 and reaffirmed through subsequent wars, was explicit. Training managed risk was acceptable for a system that saved lives through fire superiority. The decision was not made lightly. It was based on comprehensive data from multiple theaters under varied conditions. And the data consistently showed that the rifle's advantages far outweighed its training liabilities. Technology and statistics, shown through a human lens, reveal the rifle's true impact. 8-round semi-automatic capacity meant a rifleman could engage multiple targets without reloading. Gas-operated semi-automatic action meant sustained fire without manual cycling. A robust operating system meant reliability under mud, sand, humidity, and cold. These characteristics, emerging from John C. Garand's engineering and refined through rigorous testing, changed infantry combat. The rifle armed not only American forces but also dozens of allied nations over decades of service. Production exceeded 6.25 million rifles in the United States alone. Italian licensed production added thousands more. The weapon served from the 1930s through the 1970s in frontline roles and continues in ceremonial service today. Its influence shaped successor designs including the M14, the M1A, and modern semi-automatic rifles worldwide. But the rifle's deepest legacy is institutional. Discipline plus design beats design alone. The M1 Garand could have been made safer through mechanical modifications. Springs could have been weakened. Safeties could have been added. Loading sequences could have been redesigned. Each change would have reduced training injuries. Each change might have compromised battlefield reliability. The Army chose reliability. It chose to train soldiers to handle an unforgiving mechanism rather than soften that mechanism at the cost of combat effectiveness. That choice, controversial in peacetime, proved correct in war. Soldiers who mastered the rifle survived. Units armed with the rifle won engagements. And nations that adopted the rifle gained fire superiority over opponents equipped with bolt-action arms. Data, not anecdotes, should govern weapons policy. Anecdotes about thumb injuries made compelling stories in barracks and on rifle ranges. But data from combat theaters told a different story. The rifle worked, soldiers trusted it, and fire superiority saved lives. The Army listened to the data. The M1's lesson transcends the rifle itself. It establishes a principle that modern militaries continue to apply: Effective weapons sometimes demand discipline from their users. Training can mitigate risk. Practice can build proficiency. But mechanical capability should not be compromised to eliminate training challenges. The rifle that demands respect from its user is often the rifle that performs best when needed most. Even perfection in war carries a cost in the flesh. The M1 Garand injured over 1,000 soldiers during training. It saved countless thousands during combat. The trade-off was acceptable because the alternative, slower fire, lost battles, higher casualties, was not. And the M1 Garand proved that victory sometimes begins with a lesson learned the hard way. If you value fact-based history grounded in documents and numbers, consider supporting the channel. What is your perspective on this part of history? Share your thoughts in the comments, because every memory and reflection helps keep the past alive.